just want to welcome everybody. We wish everybody a Gemar Chatima Tova. Should be a wonderful year, a good year for everybody, personally, communally, and for the world at large. Okay, and welcome. And as our last class, actually before Yom Kippur, and the next class afterwards will be actually Friday morning, 9:30. We'll have our Parshat HaShavuos here. I'll be giving it on Hazinu this Friday, 9:30 a.m. And then we'll keep you posted with the shirim after that. Okay, but I want to thank Usher and Pessi Reimer for sponsoring the shir tonight in Zecher Asher's mother, Ray Reimer, Chaya Rachel Bat Asher. Then the Neshama should have an aliyah, and that we should come to all have long life and come together for good occasions. So thank you to the Reimer family, good friends of Torah in Motion. We've traveled together, been together, learned together, and we appreciate it, and you should have good memories and long life. Thank you very much. And now, Dr. Shapiro, it's all yours.
Okay, hello everyone, and then it's good to be here. Date is September 13th, 2021. After tonight, we won't see each other for a little while, but I have a lot to do. Get right to it. It's been a while since we've seen each other, so more than usual, perhaps. First, I want to begin. Bill Gewirtz had been asking for a while when Boyarin's next piece was going to be. Well, lo and behold, let me show you here. It hit today, I think it is. If you want to see it on tablet, Walking and Learning on Shabbos with Professor Dimitrovsky, I highly recommend it. Only because I think some of you miss some of the things we did last class. I want to just let everyone be aware, pay attention in shul, those who are interested in this sort of thing. This Shabbos, right? First Aliyah, you can listen to maybe today. This is verse 6. Often mispronounced, although believe it or not, I looked on YouTube and almost everyone gets it right. And I don't just need people like Rabbi Weider and this Rabbi Slavin from Chabad, but pretty much everyone gets it right. But my experience in shul is pretty much everyone gets it wrong. This verse 6 in Hazinu, is actually to be pronounced Hal Adoshem, not Hala Adoshem or anything like that. In fact, I think here you can listen to Rabbi Weider.
Shecheis lo banov mumam dar ikesh uvsaltal hal Adonai tigmeluzos am novel velo.
Oh, now you don't need to correct someone if they make that mistake, but they probably will make it. So you should tell them after, I guess after davening, if you wish, you can. What else do I have here? Okay, I checked it. I checked last class, and remember I told you that there was this issue with the Ramaz's wedding, and that it was poisoned. I thought it was in this book. Fraud, Corruption, and Holiness, by Harold Gastwort, Zvi Gastwort, which is great if you want to know about all the disputes and all the shenanigans that were going on with kashrus. But it's not. It actually, I found it in a different book. Here's another great book, Jenna Weissman Josselin, New York's Jewish Jews, the Orthodox Community in the Interwar Years. And you could see it about the poison on at the wedding on page 62. But then I did a little more research. You know where it really comes from? It comes from an article in the New Yorker. You can see it online, Daughter of the Ramaz, by this novelist S.N. Behrman. He wrote a memoir. You can read the whole story. It turns out, as he explains, that originally they thought it was someone who wanted to marry her and didn't marry her, and he poisoned everyone. Where's the paragraph? But that's not what happened. The real reason is that, yes, there was 2,000 guests, they say. I don't know if it's exaggeration. And it was the butchers who are the wife of a butcher in particular. Some of the butchers, he explains, They got a druggist to concoct a poison that will not be fatal, but will make the guest violently ill. So you can read all about it in the New Yorker article, Daughter of the Ramaz. You gotta be worried about these butchers. I think I'll mention David Fishman today. So in another book of his, oops, let me stop sharing it here. In this book, you can see the Jews of Odessa. It's best you can, if you're interested, you can remove all the other boxes and then you just have me. That's probably easier then you don't see anything else. Hold on a second. Yes, so let me, what does he say? He tells a story on page 37, how in Odessa, the Rav of the city was beaten on the streets by several Jews because they were unhappy with his stringent approach. What that means, obviously, it's referring to kashrus and things like that, I assume. That's when the rabbis could create problems in their people's minds because they're making everything treif, and the butchers will feel upset about that. So there you go. Just going in line to what I have here. Okay, I listened to the talk last week, and I do want to clarify something. I told you the incredible, amazing story, strange story with Rav Kook and how Harry Fishel, we're going to pick up with Harry Fishel in a few minutes. He comes in with his fiance and he tells them to take his fiance's hand and he's going to bless them. And I said that, well, maybe if she was post childbirth age, it wouldn't be such a problem. Really, I need to clarify that only would apply had she gone to the mikvah. Even if it was 30 years before, otherwise it would be an issue. And I mean, it's possible because it's hard to say that holding hands is not what we call derech chiba. On the other hand, if she is, I guess, patara and miyuchedet lo, then it is perhaps, then it wouldn't be an issue, at least from that standpoint. There's a long discussion one of you sent me from the Otzer Chachma forum. That gets into the issue of if Pilegish is allowed. What about if something technically is not forbidden, but it could raise the Yetzer Hara? That could be an issue, but I do want to clarify that. I said the last class that the Midrash Haggadah I showed you, the strange Midrash Haggadah, was from Steinsaltz. It's actually not. He did another one. This is from Margolio. So make that. I keep following the Otzer Chachma forum on Saul Lieberman, and lo and behold, they have another good story. Maybe some of you heard of the name of Moshe Shmuel Shapiro. So important Haredi Rosh Yeshiva. Someone says that his father heard from Moshe Shmuel Shapiro the following. He was Rosh Yeshiva in a yeshiva called Ber Yaakov, and he saw Tosefta Kipshuta. So he asked him, what's Tosefta Kipshuta doing here? And the reply was, Moshe Shapiro said to him that he personally once saw Rav Elvo Soloveitchik learning it. And he asked him, what's going on here? Because we'll see Lieberman today where he ends up. And the brisker Rav, who is no liberal, on the contrary, he's very, very extreme in many ways. He replied as follows, Ein divrei Torah makablim tuma, which means that even if Lieberman might have made bad career choices, his Torah is still good Torah, and he's not concerned with anything else. Okay, I got the stuff here about confession. A number of you emailed me. I told you a few classes ago that Navardic, it's strange. We know they would gather together. They had their various vads, and they would mention their sins to one another. And I said that that's not the way we do things. So we're all going to be doing confession very soon. We're not supposed to do it out loud. In fact, there's sources that say you're not supposed to do it out loud. You don't want the other people to hear you. The question always is, and what are all these sins? God, if any of us do all these sins that we're going to say al hate about, then you got real trouble there. But we assume that we're saying it, we're all a collective. So even if I haven't done sin X, Y, and Z, maybe I did another one, but we do it all together. But what's the story with confession? Because a few of you emailed me things, and it's really in Yonah D'Yom. Well, first, let me share a couple things. Only because it's in Yonah D'Yoma. Let me delete this one here and delete Tzvi Gastwert. We'll get to this in a little bit. Where do I want to show you here? there's a Shulchan Aruch I'm going to show you here if I can find it. Here it is. Okay, this is it. If you look in the Shulchan Aruch, the laws dealing with Erev Yom Kippur, of course, it also applies on Yom Kippur as well. And this is in Tuf Reish Zayin, in Orach Chaim, Siman Gimel. What does it say? Sarech lisvados lumad. You have to, when we do the confession, we do it standing up. So, and what's the basis of this? The basis of it, if you look in the commentaries, it's here in Masechet Yoma, where it says, Bar Hamdude said, I was standing before Shmuel and he was sitting, and when the prayer reader reached the words, but we have sinned, Shmuel stood. So here we see that you're supposed to stand. What's not pointed out, and you can impress someone by this, it's not pointed out by any of the commentaries as far as I could see, is that actually in the book of Nehemiah, chapter 9, in verse 2, it's talking about, the Ezra and Nehemiah is really one book, but they split it up. They intermarried, and then they returned to Eretz Yisrael, and Ezra tells them that they have to separate from their non-Jewish wives, all that. But if you look in verse 2, it says the seed of Israel separated from themselves from all foreigners, vayamdu, vayisvadu. They stood and confessed their sins. So really, we have an explicit verse in Nach that shows you that confession is supposed to be done standing up. But what about confessing to other people? What I said is that this is really not the standard thing we do. And what was I basing it on? Well, I'm basing it on, of course, just life, having lived in this world to know what goes on. But there is in particular a responsum of a great rabbi called Rav Meir of Eisenstadt. Now, I'm going to have to repeat a few things that those of you who are with us previous semesters, actually not the last semester, the one before that, might remember, but I assume that people come and go, so I'll say it again, and it'll remind you if you were here, and if you weren't, it's new. There is a great rabbi named Rav Meir of Eisenstadt. If you go on my Central Europe trip, you remember him, because we go to Eisenstadt in Austria, and Eisenstadt is a city, and not that far from Vienna, but smack in the middle of Eisenstadt, there's an old Jewish cemetery there with one of the Gedolei Yisrael buried, Rav Meir Eisenstadt. And he wasn't just the rabbi of Eisenstadt, he was the rabbi, whoever was the rabbi in Eisenstadt was the rabbi of what they called the seven communities. This is striking because, and you'll see this in Germany as well, right in the middle of cities, you have Jewish cemeteries. We know that the Nazis burnt synagogues, they burnt Jews, but they left many cemeteries in prime real estate. And it's a big question as to why there are Jewish cemeteries smack in the main cemetery in Berlin where Mendelssohn was buried. That wasn't destroyed by the Nazis, it was destroyed by the communists. So what is it that you have in Germany? All over Germany, you have cemeteries going back 1,000 years, and you have cemeteries in Austria. Maybe they figured people walk by and remember the race, that the Jewish race that no longer exists. Or some people have speculated that the Nazi leaders had this fear of, the occult. And whatever it is, that's what you'll find. So smack in the middle of Eisenstadt, they have the cemetery for Rav Meir of Eisenstadt. I take my groups there whenever I go. Interestingly enough, just last year, lo and behold, or 2 years ago, no, now it's probably 3 years ago, the US government in Austria restored Rav Meir of Eisenstadt's grave. And there was a whole ceremony. It was the US government's Commission for the Preservation of America's Heritage Abroad. I don't know what Meir of Eisenstadt has to do with the heritage abroad, other than the fact that maybe there's some wealthy Jews who descend from there that had some influence, because if Rav Meir of Eisenstadt has anything to do with the Jewish heritage abroad, then any grave has something to do with it. But the last time I was there 2 years ago, for the first time, and Rabbi Billet from Long Island is on this commission. So maybe someone can ask him why, out of all the Gedolim, Rav Meir of Eisenstadt. So here you see, if you go there, you'd open this up and you could light the candles for the Gedol, for the great rabbis. People like to light candles. So that's Rav Meir of Eisenstadt. Now he has a responsum in his work Panim Eros, and it is found in I printed it out here. Simon Bay's number 178. And he was asked, someone who wants to do tshuva, and he wants to confess about his sin. Why? So that he's embarrassed. If he's embarrassed, then he'll get a better repentance. Is it permissible? And Rabbi Eisenstadt says, absolutely not. This is not what we do. This is, it should be in private, only to God, unless you want to go to the Rav and get a penance. You want to tell him you sinned in, but not for the public, not for other people to know. And he says, recently, new people have come. It's referring maybe to the Hasidic movement, I guess. And they started saying that you have to confess your prayer sins in public, because there were some Hasidic, Bratslav thought you should do that. But he says that this is not the Jewish way, and don't do this at all. However, Moshe tells me, as points out, if you look, I don't want to spend too much time on it. If you look in the Gemara and Yoma, 86b, they do speak about confessing your sins in public. And there's a dispute about confessing your sins in public. One rabbi says that it's only if your sin was in public, then the confession should be in public. And another says, though, anything bein adam u'chaveiro should be, and that's what the Rambam holds, should be confessed in public. I don't know of anyone who does that. I've never seen anyone does that. But in terms of confessing one's sins, as I said, I want to be in my office to get some of the books. You have it in Rav Nachman. You can look in Arthur Green's book. Well, he talks about confessing to the tzaddik as important. If you look in Kannerfogel's book, he speaks about peering through the lattices, 254, 255. He speaks about the Hasidic Ashkenaz. You have, for the Hasidic Ashkenaz, the idea was two things. For not only will you get a penance, but the embarrassment of confessing, of letting the sage know about it. And finally, in Moshe Chalamish's book, Introduction to Kabbalah, page 61, he also speaks about the practice of confession, which among the Kabbalists in Tzfat, they would confess to one another about the sins they committed during the week. But then he goes on to say that it didn't last long because Rav Chaim Vital and other Mekubalim said this is not the way. As I said, though, the Rambam, and thanks to those who said I should call attention, that the Rambam actually thinks that bein adam u'chaveiro, you should confess in public. The Musar teachers had an issue with this. So what does that mean, confess in public? Let's say I tell Lashon Hara about someone. Am I supposed to now go and apologize before Yom Kippur, before Rosh Hashanah, and say, I spoke Lashon Hara, I said bad things about you? If you just look at the sources, the answer is yes, you sinned against him, you should go get forgiveness to have tshuva. But Rav Yisrael, the Chavis Chaim might even say that. I forget if he says he should, but Rav Yisrael Salanter says absolutely not. Rav Yisrael Salanter says, if you go up to someone who doesn't know, let's say you go up to him tomorrow before Yom Kippur and say, I just want you to know, I was really saying bad things about you, this and that, do you forgive me? You're going to make him feel a lot worse. So Rav Yisrael Salanter thought that that's a terrible thing to do. And that in such a case, when, even though it's a bein adam u'chaveiro, when we're taught that bein adam u'chaveiro, you can't get repentance, a kapara, until you actually go to the individual. That's not, Rav Yisrael says, when the person doesn't know about it, because then you're just making it a lot worse. It's seichel. But before Rav Yisrael said it, I don't think anyone called attention to that. Let me say one more thing, and then we'll move on to Lieberman. So many books here. One day I'm going to have a tour. Everyone can come to my house. We'll have the class in my house, and you'll see the books I have. Not just the amount, but I have some very, very unusual stuff in the house. I've shared some of it. I've spoken about this book, this author, Chaim Dolphin. You remember I've spoken about him. Second. I have two screens here, so so you can see it. Chaim Dolphin, and he just came out with some more books, and 3 at a time he comes out with. The Rebbe and Ramosha, a whole book about Ramosha Feinstein. By the way, I'm very, although this book has all the problems that the other books have that I've spoken about, the need of good editing and things like that, but I like this book for the simple reason that, remember the picture I told you about that I never get any credit for? Lo and behold, in this book, he has the picture. And he gives me and Jack Prince credit for it. So I thank Rabbi Dolphin very much. But I want to ask anyone, I want some help here. And that's because he has another picture in the book. And I've also shown pictures like this. I showed a picture of from Dov Zakheim's wedding that he gave me. You have in pictures of weddings from the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, maybe even later, I don't know when Dov got married, 70s, you have pictures of rabbis walking down the aisle. I guess before, I don't know, maybe I assume it's before the groom walks down the aisle in the family. Here you have a big picture and you have all these rabbis. You have Rabbi Palef, you have Moshe Feinstein, all the picture, I forgot to bring it up, but it's a picture of Rabbi Soloveitchik and Rav Shmuel Volkin at Dov Zakheim's wedding. Has anyone, and you can write in the chat, we'll see this later, has anyone actually been to a wedding where as a kavod to the rabbis walk down the aisle as well? And I think this is the picture of the rabbis walking down the aisle here. The picture I'm talking about, you see the Lubavitch Rebbe there in the middle. Maybe it's not, maybe they're sitting or it looks like they're standing, I don't know, but there definitely is. In fact, I will, before the end of this class, let me just see if I can pull it up right now. And I'll show you what I mean, because I have a number of, I was able to pull it up very quickly. So I'm going to, since I mentioned it, I will show you the picture. Hold on, here you go. And I'd love to know if anyone has ever been, does anyone still do this nice practice? There it is. This is from Dov Zakheim's wedding. You see Rabbi Soloveitchik, Zir Moshe Feinstein in the front. You see that's Rav Shmuel Volkin. And I don't know, is there any weddings where they give the rabbis the kavod? It's not a bad thing if you have a lot of rabbis, because if you have a lot of rabbis at the wedding, you got a problem. You can't give them all brachos under the chuppah, especially if the other family wants to take some brachos for their family. So that way, if you let them all walk down the aisle, maybe it's a good kavod. With that, I want to turn back to Rabbi Saul Lieberman. Wait till you see what we have today. Lieberman wrote an article where, if you recall last class, I mentioned Yosef Tzvi Dunner and his strange idea that there's some crazy passages in the Talmud that he thinks that were put in by heretics. Saul Lieberman in the Sefer Zikaron for Moshe Shor, he has an article there in which he says you have these crazy cases, but these cases, this is what the rabbis heard. This is reality. For example, another famous case is they ask, what about if you have two heads? Which one do you put the tefillin on? How do you do that? And in the Gemara, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi is quoted as rebuking this person. What are you asking such a stupid question for? He says that you should either get out of here or be put in chayrim. Well, Lieberman says he gives all the sources that no, these ideas were around in ancient times. The Roman writers speak about it. Greek writers speak about it. Siamese twins. Look, it's not a common thing, but if it's a possibility, then the rabbis want to know about it. So basically the upshot of Lieberman's whole point, you can read his article there, is that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi shouldn't have rebuked him because he was probably just repeating something he heard, and Rabbi Yehuda Nasi might have thought it was crazy, but it's reality. It can happen. I think we would say you put them on both heads, because now we know that they actually are two separate people, just happen to be attached. Well, let us return to Saul Lieberman. We ended the last class. We were speaking about Machon Harry Fishel. We're going to speak more about it now. Today, if you go there, you'll see the sign. It says it's called Ariel. The books that are published are under the imprint of Harry Fishel. For whatever reason, the name was changed to Ariel, or the major name. The Beit Midrash is Ariel, but it's preserved elements of the Harry Fishel Institute. And we said that Lieberman was appointed because they wanted someone who could also bring an academic perspective. And because this is appreciated by Rav Kook. Rav Kook, of course, opened a yeshiva, but he also wanted to have that as well. If you read the book, Harry Fishel, Pioneer of Jewish Philanthropy, page 433, and he was very involved. It's not like Harry Fishel just gave the money and disappeared. No, he was very involved in the running and all sorts of other things. He says that Saul Lieberman, he talks about how he was engaged to be the dean, and he says, I remember the first lecture he gave. And Lieberman suggested that the entire method of study should be changed to put it on a more academic basis, a more scientific basis, to do research and publish the results. And he speaks about this in a number of chapters. Chapter 25, he speaks about, chapter 24, they talk about the decision to publish a critical edition of the Mishnah. I'll get back to that in a minute. And how the rabbis, namely Rav Herzog and Rav Harlap and Rabbi Hillman or Rav Saul Meltzer, they all give approval of it. And then the different scholars that they appoint, these scholars all had, or most of them, had small beards or long beards. In fact, I showed you a picture last class. I'm not going to bother with the picture again. I just want to see for myself. I'm looking at all the people in the picture have beards. So Lieberman's the only one without a beard. He never had the beard, but he's appointed there. If you read in the Jubilee volume they put out in honor of Harry Fishel, Rav Kook has a whole essay in which he speaks about what's the purpose of the Harry Fishel Institute. And he says, we recognize that although, we have regular yeshivas, but this is going to be different because our people are going to focus on Torah in its entirety, the Halacha, the Agadah, the Babylonian Jerusalem Talmuds. They translate it into English. This is his article. The Tosefta, the Sifra, the Sifrei, the Mechilta, the Midrashim, the study of Torah and all its branches, the codifiers, etc., etc. This is supposed to be a combination of an academic approach, number one, and a traditional approach, and also a broadening of the curriculum. If you go to a typical Lithuanian yeshiva, they're not studying Sifrei, Sifra, Tosefta, but why not? That's traditional Jewish literature, Yerushalmi. So both there's going to be, not to replace traditional Torah study, but to put it together with traditional Torah study, an academic approach to lower criticism, not higher criticism, and attention to realia, as well as broadening the traditional curriculum. That was very important. If a new book just appeared, and it's this book by Yehuda Mirsky. He's spoken for Torah in Motion. He's written, first of all, he wrote this great book on Rav Kook, which came out a few years ago, award-winning book, a really wonderful introduction to Rav Kook. This is his doctoral dissertation. It deals with Rav Kook's early writings. I've found this book quite helpful, although it's not a popular book like the other one, but it's still very good. He says on page 30, but I'm going to now give a criticism, because on page 341, he talks about how Rav Kook, who was interested in these academic things, he encouraged and inspired disciples of his to use the tools of modern academic scholarship. Well, and in the note, he mentions he had substantial influence on Saul Lieberman. I don't believe that's the case. There's no question that he encouraged Saul Lieberman, but Saul Lieberman, he was already a complete academic scholar. He was chosen in 34, I think it is, to be head of the Harry Fishel Institute. He was already an academic scholar. He already published numerous volumes. He's not an influence. He's chosen Dafka because he was someone who had an appreciation for a more academic method and joining it. When I say academic method, it's pshat. It's what Rashi would do, as we said, if Rashi was around today, using all the information you can to tell us what the pshat is. You can see this in Lieberman's articles also. He has an article, they came out, remember I told you he taught at this Machon Lifshitz, he taught Talmud. Well, the grandson of this, the founder, this Eliezer Meir Lifshitz, or the one it's named after, he was killed in one of Israel's wars, and they put out a memorial volume in the 70s. And Lieberman has an article there in which he talks about his first teaching, when he used to teach there. And it's an article on how to explain a Mishnah. He mentions a Mishnah, I think it was in Baba Kama or Baba Matzia. He just takes a Mishnah and uses his approach to explain it, but it's all pshat. There were students of Rav Kook that he encouraged. Professor Zaidel actually taught for a time in Yeshiva University. Shmuel Kalman Mirsky, he's mentioned, that's Yehuda Mirsky's grandfather, B.M. Levin, Benjamin Menashe Levin, who does the Otzar Gaonim. He had a great influence on him. So there were people, but not Lieberman. But he had an important relationship with Lieberman. Rav Kook and Lieberman used to learn every single day, without exception, except when Rav Kook was out of the country, but or had to, I guess, emergency stuff came up. But they used to learn every day, Torah and Beis Yosef, for an hour every day except Friday, and they met from 6 to 7 p.m. And the deal was neither of them were allowed to prepare ahead of time. They had to come, and they learned it together every single day. Shapiro actually mentions this on page 53, and he gives an interesting story here that once Rav Kook came to a Sheva Brachos from Ger Hasidim that was at the Rebbe's brother's apartment. That was the same building that Lieberman lived in, and he saw Lieberman in his room with the door open learning. Rav Kook went and he sat with Lieberman to learn a little bit, and he did this to show the Ger Hasidim that the respect you have to show for a Torah scholar, even a clean-shaven one who doesn't look like a Ger Hasid. On this page in Shapiro, he mentions all the other Gedolim that Lieberman had good relations with. He quotes here Yitzhak Raphael, who used to be head of Mossad Rav Kook. Yitzhak Raphael, who was one of Lieberman's students at the Hebrew University, says that Lieberman enjoyed the respect of Rabbi El Yashiv. Now, if you look in what Raphael is referring to, he's referring to Rabbi Yashiv that we know's grandfather, who was a great Mekubal. He's known as the Leshem. He was also close to Rav Kook. But they actually get it wrong here. They say Yosef Shalom Yashiv, the Abbas of Jerusalem. Yosef Shalom Yashiv was a young man in those days. So he, I guess he could have respected him, but that's not who, and maybe he did have a lot of respect for him, but that's not who Raphael is referring to. The problem is that the dates don't work out. Lieberman comes to Israel in 27. The Leshem is already dead by then. And he had come on Aliyah shortly before that. So unfortunately, Yitzhak Raphael was no longer alive, so I can't ask him that. So Lieberman is at the Harry Fishel Institute. He's the head of it. His job is to guide. These were students that were already huge Torah scholars. They didn't need to be taught. What they needed to be was guided, because they wanted to introduce them to a more academic approach. And Lieberman, in his shiurim, could show them how the two could be merged. Lieberman actually told Rav Neria, Moshe Neria, that Rav Kook was influential in encouraging him in his studies of Yerushalmi, to keep studying Yerushalmi. Maybe at the beginning, that was what it was, but that's not academic. Rav Kook also told Lieberman was making money, part of making a living. He would serve on Dinei Torah. He was one of the Dayanim. Zeborer, he'd be picked and he'd serve as a Dayan. Rav Kook told him not to do that. It's taking away from his learning. While Lieberman is at the institute there, first of all, Rav Kook dies shortly thereafter, and Rav Herzog is elected chief rabbi, and then Rav Herzog becomes like the honorary head of the this institute. He becomes very close to Rav Saul Lieberman. This will have an influence later on as well. And Saul Lieberman was a big supporter of Rav Herzog. I thank Yaakov Yellen for telling me that in the autobiography of Chaim Herzog, which I didn't know, and speaking about the election of his father to chief rabbinate after Rav Kook passed away, this was in 1936, Saul Lieberman organized the forces, as it were, in support of Rav Herzog. But Rav Herzog was known to him already. They had corresponded. And Rav Herzog was on the honorary board. Even before he came to Israel, he was on the honorary board of the Harry Fishel Institute. While Lieberman was at the Harry Fishel Institute, he publishes 4 volumes of Tosefes Rishonim. That's a commentary on Tosefta using variant readings. It really is a predecessor for Tosefta Kipshuta. So we'll speak later about Tosefta Kipshuta. Hold off on that. He also published another work. Well, he didn't publish. While he was there, another work appeared, which is a very interesting work, and today no one knows about it. And what am I referring to? Yaakov Herzog, who was also studied there. The son, Jacob Herzog, we've spoken about him, becomes the the ambassador to Canada. He was chosen as chief rabbi to England, but he dies before he could take up the post. He passes away, I think, at age 52. It's a real tragedy. He's a Talmud Chacham of the First Order and also a diplomat, an advisor to Levi Eshkol, to Ben Gurion. You can see pictures of him even in Israel not wearing a yarmulke. It's incredible to think that this rabbi, ordained rabbi, Talmud Chacham, the atmosphere in the 50s and 60s was that if you're working in government, even in the Jewish state, you don't put on a yarmulke. That's the way it was. And you can listen on YouTube. Unfortunately, it split it up into like 8 different sections, but you can listen back to back. The famous debate of Yaakov Herzog with Arnold Toynbee, the famous historian, who didn't have a soft spot for Judaism. On the contrary, he thought of Judaism as a fossilized religion and time to be swept away. The debate between Yaakov Herzog shows that Toynbee, for all his knowledge, is an ignorant person when it comes to Judaism. So you can, unfortunately, don't have the video, but we have the audio of Jacob Herzog debating Toynbee, famous historian Toynbee. We also have, as I mentioned a few weeks ago, the audio now of Yaakov Herzog, who traveled to visit with Rabbi Yaakov Weinberg, and you can listen to Yaakov Herzog in Yiddish and Rabbi Herzog, Rabbi Yaakov Weinberg. He traveled to Switzerland to speak to Rabbi Yaakov Weinberg. Fortunately, they published a transcript, which is mostly accurate. There's some mistakes in the transcript. They couldn't understand things that are being said, Talmudic things, but I can send anyone a transcript who's interested. It's not the sort of thing that will ever be out in an Art Scroll biography or anything like that, because Rabbi Weinberg actually has some strong comments about certain things. And he speaks about one Hasidic Rebbe who remain nameless for now, but he says he's a complete Amaretz. And Herzog says, a real Amaretz? He goes, a real Amaretz. He says all sorts of other interesting things. But when Yaakov Herzog was only 24 years old, he published a Mishnah, an English. Let me show you what it looks like here. They decided, remember I told you that they wanted to publish the Mishnah? They came up with this idea that they're going to publish a critical edition of the Mishnah. And then the suggestion was also an English translation. And when I say a critical edition, using all the different manuscripts, they didn't get very far, but let me show you what it looks like. They only published one volume. Let's see, here it is. Okay, they published one volume. They published Brachos, Peah, and Demai. Here's the first page. It's, you see, it has the English translation. It has a commentary. It has the Bartanura, but has a commentary in English as well. And on the side, you have the references to Rambam, to the Mishnah, you have the Rishonim who mentioned it, and you have notes on it. It is, without question, the best edition, best translation of the Mishnah there is out there, but you can't buy it. Not only that, it has an introduction in English by Jacob Herzog with great learning, in which it talks about all the different theories about the composition of the Mishnah. When was it written? How was it written? I highly encourage everyone who has access to Otzar Chachma, who's interested in this, to read it. Now, there is an English preface to this as well. Remember, this appears in 45. And Lieberman is still signed. This is the 80th birthday of Fishel. Lieberman is still signed. He's at Dean Harry Fishel Institute in Jerusalem, even though this is from 1945, showing that he still was considered the dean, and Fishel at least assumed that he'd be going back to Israel. And also in the foreword, 3-page foreword, Lieberman, just like Rav Kook, speaks about what they're trying to do at the Harry Fishel Institute. That, of course, we always have great yeshiva students, and we also have academic scholars in the seminaries in Europe, but we want to combine all of them. And he talks about what the Harry Fishel Institute, the first thing the Harry Fishel Institute did was that they published a bunch of unpublished commentaries on Tractate Moed Katan with notes. You can still get that. It's very important. And then they started something which continues to this day. I don't have it here because I have it in Scranton. I have a few volumes. They published a new Gemara that Rav Kook put together all the halachic references, so that when you're learning the Gemara, you want to see what the Rambam says, Shulchan Aruch, it's written on the side. And in the back of it, the members of the Harry Fishel Institute would do like a summing up of all the different views of the Shitot of the Rishonim. So after you learn, let's say a sugya, and they have it on Pesachim, they have it on Beitzah, on Bava Kama, I think it's Bava Kama, on Sanhedrin. It's really nice. After you learn a sugya, you go to it's called the Hachabrura and Beru Haracha. You go to the back, and they sum up for you and explain all the different Rishonim. And Lieberman explains that they used manuscripts from the different Mishnahs all over the world, manuscripts of Mishnah from all over the world. Unfortunately, because Lieberman leaves, there's really no one to guide this, and they're planning on doing, Fischel says, we hope that we'll be able to complete the whole Mishnah. They never did anything else. Once Lieberman was gone, the Institute really, it foundered. There wasn't much going on. Much later, Shar Yashav Cohen was appointed as the dean, but he's also not an academic scholar, and he's an open-minded Talmud Chacham, and they did very interesting stuff there. Zalman Goldberg will go teach there. They did put together the Ariel Rashi, which is it's the first class, it's the standard real edition if you want to get into the details of Rashi with all the different manuscripts and everything. So they didn't go to the Mishnah or Talmudic stuff. They did do the Rashi. That's the very important work. But that was a couple decades. They started that after Lieberman left. They published, as I recall, some Rishonim, but they never continued. And to this day, it never became again this institute where they would combine academic study and traditional Torah study, academic Torah study and traditional Torah study. Instead, it's a wonderful institution. It's an open-minded institution of higher Torah learning. It's not opposed to academic studies, but it's not done under the roof of Ariel. They don't have anyone to lead it. You need a figure like Lieberman. Those are hard to come by. We did one more work before his time ended in Eretz Yisrael. He published an edition from manuscript of Midrash Rabbah on Devarim, the Devarim Rabbah, and it's different than the edition we have. And he explains in the introduction that the one that he's publishing, if you notice, if you look at the citations, the Sephardic Rishonim refer to a Midrash Rabbah that has passages that the Ashkenazic don't have. And we didn't even have the passages in Devarim Rabbah cited by the Sephardic Rishonim. The Devarim Rabbah that Lieberman cites is indeed the Devarim Midrash Rabbah cited by the Sephardic Rishonim. The Ashkenazic Rishonim, they cite the Devarim Rabbah we had. Lieberman could have remained there. He could have remained at the Harry Fischel Institute until the end of his life. He would have created an institution that, unlike any others, because yes, you can go to Yeshiva University, you can go to Bernard Reva Graduate School, and you can study academic stuff. You can do that at Bar Ilan, but you don't have the Talmidei Chachamim. You have the YU, you have the Rosh Yeshiva, and then you have the academic scholars who are doing that. The same thing at Bar Ilan. Bar Ilan is a kollel and an institute for Machon Gadol Torah, but then you have the university. Machon Harry Fischel would have been like the Rabbinical Seminary of Berlin, where the same people and these outstanding Talmidei Chachamim who had to know like backwards and forwards at least 3 Sidarim of Shas. Think what that means. That they then are introduced by a master, one who is an expert in Shas Bavli, Yerushalmi, everything, Lieberman. He's introducing them into the academic approach, and it's dafka people like that who are themselves such great Torah scholars that they are the ones that are the best practitioners. As we saw with Lieberman and Dimitrovsky and others, they are really the great practitioners of academic Torah study. So he could have stayed there. He's one of the great Torah scholars in Jerusalem, respected by all. Then he makes an announcement, which surprises everyone, that he's coming to the United States. He received an invitation. He accepted a temporary invitation to go for a year or two to New York to teach at an institution called the Jewish Theological Seminary, a non-Orthodox institution. What does this even mean, a non-Orthodox institution? Does Lieberman even know what it means, a non-Orthodox institution? In the land of Israel, there's no such thing as non-Orthodox institutions. And what does it even mean at the seminary? What do you mean? They're driving on Shabbos? It's the people in those days, especially, they're Shomer Torah mitzvos. So it's not clear exactly if Lieberman even knew what this institution was. We know it's not true about Dimitrovsky and some others. Dimitrovsky, Lieberman makes a whole effort, as I'll explain, to bring great Torah scholars to seminary. Dimitrovsky comes to America, and only when he's in America, he then is sees that as a problem. This is not an Orthodox institution, and he doesn't know what to do. He goes to Lubavitcher Rebbe. Frank Zlotnick takes him to Lubavitcher Rebbe, and Lubavitcher Rebbe says, as long as Lieberman's there, you could stay at the seminary. So it's not clear even what Lieberman knew. He knew that Louis Ginsburg and Louis Finkelstein were great Torah scholars. And they were doing academic type Torah study. He writes to Ginsburg that your place is the only place where they can do academic, like an academic approach to Torah study. He didn't think much of, he didn't think much of the Fishel Institute. It seems that it was very hard to replicate the students there the way he would replicate himself in the students. And Yeshiva University, Yeshiva College in those days, Rebel Graduate School, they had Avram Weiss, but I guess Lieberman wasn't as impressed because that Weiss is doing higher criticism. That's not Lieberman's thing. But he knows who Ginsburg is, he knows who Finkelstein is. So he has an inclination already. He's been corresponding with Ginsburg for more than 10 years. He's given this invitation where basically he teaches a little. What's wrong with teaching? He'll teach he'll teach Torah wherever he wants. He's happy to teach Torah anywhere. And he can sit and learn. If you know that the hours, what is he teaching? 4 or 5 hours a week. And he's given a salary. He was paid starvation wages in Israel. Everything looks great. And I don't even know if he considered that it was going to be a problem, an issue when he was in Israel. As he will soon see, it does become an issue when he gets to America. Again, what does conservative mean if you're living in Israel? It means more liberal on certain halachic matters. We'll speak about how they wanted to liberalize Jewish divorce law. So like marriage al tanai, I should say, not divorce law, which was a debate among many Gedolim thought that you could do a marriage al tanai. In the end, they didn't do it because the other Rabbanim disagreed with them. But, it's not like you're violating halacha. There's no decision yet in the 1930s that you can drive to shul on Shabbos. The seminary is completely halachic. So it's really not clear exactly what it meant. Did he know that the conservative movement had many shuls? In fact, the typical conservative shul didn't have a mechitza. I don't think he knew about it, but why? I don't know if he considered that necessarily relevant. The seminary itself didn't say dafka to take a shul without a mechitza, but they did permit it. But Yeshiva University permitted it, or I should say REITs permitted it also. And there are plenty of OU shows without machitzas. Wait till I give you the figures later of the so-called, not even so-called, actual Orthodox shows. They're definitely Orthodox. They're members of the OU with YU and Ner Yisrael rabbis, Chaim Berlin rabbis, and they didn't have machitzas. So you had plenty of Skokie. The Skokie yeshiva sent its graduates out routinely to shows without machitzas. So as we will see, and as I'll develop, it's very difficult in many ways to really see the differences between Orthodox and conservative in the 30s into the 40s. We start seeing differences. Wait till I show you something, if I get to it today, that with Louis Finkelstein, and he was actually rabbi for a time of an Orthodox shul. But so we'll get back to that. But why did Lieberman, are there other reasons perhaps why Lieberman agreed to go to the seminary? I already mentioned to you what Kamenetsky said, that Lieberman didn't need to be concerned about any of these issues, even if he knew, assuming he knew about them, because he didn't have children. All he wanted to do was sit and learn, and this gave him the opportunity to do that. Spiro and Shochet go into it in more detail, and they give a number of reasons, which I guess probably are all correct. This is on page 14 and on. Livelihood pressures, they say. We know that Lieberman never had money. There's even stories that he didn't have money that maybe that contributed to his first wife dying. He couldn't buy the medicines. We know that he, in fact, on page 15, they quote Lieberman's brother as suggesting that Lieberman didn't have the money to take her to Vienna for a surgery. Lieberman couldn't finish his medical studies, his sister-in-law said, because of a lack of funds. And then when he was dismissed from Hebrew University, he lost that as well. And like I said, they weren't paying him much at Fishel. Research opportunities, that's the next thing that they mentioned. It was ideal conditions to study, to learn. He teaches a few hours a week. They give him a decent salary, and he can learn Torah, and he has the library, the greatest library. Today, it would be the Hebrew University, the Jewish National Library, the best. But then I think it would be the Jewish Theological Seminary, and also manuscripts, the greatest collection of manuscripts. This is before they started selling their manuscripts. He wouldn't, he had a lot of free time. Then they say traditional ambiance, that the institution had a traditional religious ambiance. This isn't Hebrew Union College. As they say here on page 17, the religious character of the seminary was quite different than most conservative congregations. An Orthodox Jew could be very comfortable there. We know that's the case. It was full of Orthodox Jewish teachers there. On page 18, they give a number of examples of Orthodox rabbis who taught there. Orthodox figures. I say figures, they say rabbis. Alexander Marx was not a rabbi, but he taught there. But they give two others, and there's more, we'll see more. One was Bernard Drachman. Who was Bernard Drachman? Here's Bernard Drachman, Orthodox rabbi. Look at the tallis. Many Orthodox rabbis would wear tallises like that. We have pictures of that. But Bernard Drachman is one of the leading Orthodox rabbis in America. He was the head of, he was a rabbi of a big Orthodox shul in New York. He was head of the OU. And he taught at the seminary. Moshe Hayamson, who was rabbi of Congregation Orach Chaim in Manhattan, on the Upper East Side, as still exists. He taught at the seminary while he was rabbi at Orach Chaim. And Drachman also. Drachman taught at the seminary while he was president of the OU. These were Orthodox rabbis teaching there. So you see, it's not to be an Orthodox person teaching there. If it's good enough for Drachman, if it's good enough for Hayamson. Hayamson was a candidate for chief rabbi of England. Hayamson was also a posek in the New York area for the modern Orthodox. So we can see here how it would make sense that, and there's no mixed seating at the seminary synagogue. Finkelstein didn't even like the term conservative. He liked the term traditional. So all this would be important for Lieberman. Finally, Spiro and Shochet mention on page 222 that when Mrs. Herzog once asked Lieberman why he didn't return to Israel, he replied that he's one of the last of the European scholars schooled in Halakha, that is, the academic scholars. And it was his task to train American Jews to make a commitment to study and observe the mitzvot. So this isn't why he came, but why he stayed. He's saying that he felt that he had a commitment, he has a responsibility to teach those Jew rabbis and others who go into the seminary the importance of halakha. That, and we'll see his letter to Agudas Rabbani next class, that he feels a responsibility. He's looking at what's going to happen if he's not there. As long as he's there, he can ensure that conservative Judaism still remains quite traditional. If he were to leave, who knows? So a responsibility, the term is achrayus, he felt he had, and he had to stay there. I found there's another book. It's, I believe I found it on Amazon as well. Yes, this book. Not a popular book. Very few. I love these sort of books though, because a lot of these books for 200 pages, out of the 200 pages, there's always some good nuggets. So in this book on page 120, and you would never expect it. Why would you expect anything to do with Lieberman in this book? But I've learned that whenever you see these sort of books, you have to look at them because you always find interesting stuff. She says that she's from Los Angeles. She asked Lieberman how he, an Orthodox Jew, reconciled his affiliation with the conservative movement's Jewish Theological Seminary. And he says as follows: "It is a privilege to work there. They give me all the time I need for my work. Without the support of the seminary, I could never have accomplished all that I have, never completed translations or written my work." I don't know. I don't think he said translations because he didn't do translations. But so here we see Lieberman saying the reason he stays is because it's perfect. He teaches Torah. What's wrong with teaching conservative Jews Torah? Could anything be wrong? We'll wait till in a few classes, we'll get to the dispute that I discuss in Saul Lieberman and the Orthodox. And we'll see what Rav Moshe Feinstein says. There's Orthodox Jews teaching in all the conservative Talmud Torahs. So what's you can certainly make a case that there's no problem teaching for Lieberman. Obviously felt on the contrary, it's good to teach them Torah, and he's able to do his writings. I found another interesting source here. This book, Vayelchu Shnehem Yachdav. This is Rabbi Dov Cohen. He's from America, and his mother takes him to Israel, Palestine, to study in yeshiva when he's a youngster, and he remains there for a number of years. And then his very interesting life story. I'm also very happy this book was not great pictures. Also, great pictures. The yeshiva students here and Gedolim. This is they translate to English. I don't know if it has everything, but they don't have if ArtScroll had it, they take out a lot of the good stuff. But on page 168, he speaks about Saul Lieberman, how Saul Lieberman would come to the Hebron Yeshiva, and he says that he was of the Gedolim from that came out of Slobodka. That's what they call them, Gdolei HaGdolim, the Yeshiva b'Slobodka. And then he mentions his family connection, how he's connected with the Chazon Ish. He says about him, and he's an agudis, this Rabbi Dov Cohen, a right winger. He says that he was a muflag b'Torah, and he was regarded even greater than Yitzchak Meir Pachiner. That's the son-in-law of Yitzchak ben Menachem. He was considered an Eloi, and he became the son-in-law of Israel Meltzer. He didn't publish much, so people don't know about him. And then he says that what was the difference? The difference is that Lieberman went to the university. Nevertheless, you couldn't be mevatel his knowledge of Torah. And whenever he came to the yeshiva, he was accepted with great kavod. But then he says, and listen to this, Lieberman was an example of what the Hasidim would complain about the Tonim, would complain about the Misnagdim. Ki haTorah b'lita hitkadsha ad kedei kach. Torah study in Lithuania was so holy, was so sanctified, sha'avura, that is for Torah study, ye'muchan halitai lihikanesa knesiyah. That for a Litvak, Torah study is so important that they would even go into a church if that meant they could study Torah. And that's how he explains how Lieberman would go to the seminary, because Torah study was so important to him that if he can learn Torah better by going to work with the conservatives, of course he would. He'd go to the Reform. He'd even go into a church. Not literally, but that's what the Hasidim would mock the Litvaks, that the Torah study for them is so much that they'll do anything. Look, the Rogachover, and we'll end with this. The Rogachover famously, when he was in Avelos, he would learn Torah. The halacha is you're not allowed to learn Torah. And the Rogachover's reply is, it's worth the punishment to learn the Torah. That is, Torah is so precious that it's worth sinning to learn Torah. I think what this means. Torah study is so important that it's worth sinning in order to, his exact language was, I'm willing to get the Malkos in heaven because the Torah is worth it. I mean, this is a Litvak. That's a Litvak, but not all Litvaks. The Chazon Ish is known to have replied that this sin is no different than any other sin. You can't do it, but that's the Rogachover, and I have other examples of this. I did a blog post where I quoted other examples, including one where Chabad, there's a criticism of Litvaks because on Tisha B'Av, it's like they need to learn, so it's worth it. My final point I'll say is that he leaves Eretz Yisrael in June of 1940. It takes him until, this is wartime, June of 1940. It takes him until October of 1940 to arrive in the United States. He has to go east, not west. He flies east, lands in India, spends time in India, and it takes months till they were able to make it. They had to fly over the Pacific, and it wasn't yet Pearl Harbor, so but you can still cross, but it's not so simple to be traveling in those days, especially if you're traveling straight. But it took him months, but he arrives in New York. He comes to the Pacific Ocean. As I said, originally there just as a few years, and this turns into 1 year, which was then extended, and this turns into a permanent appointment. So next class, we will pick up right where we left off, because although Lieberman might not have known what the seminary is in Israel, in Eretz Yisrael, and for him, he's just coming to teach Torah, there had been a battle going on in America between the Orthodox rabbis and the conservative movement for the last, let's say, especially 10 years. And it's focused in particular on one matter in particular, the Rabbi Louis Epstein will speak about, and the first time the conservative movement attempts to alter Jewish law in the way that the Orthodox wouldn't accept it. So a great feud breaks out, and Lieberman, by arriving here, is seen as giving legitimacy at the worst possible time to the conservative movement. The Reform movement, the Orthodox don't care about. Everyone knows that the Reform is michutz lamachana, outside the camp. But the conservative movement, the typical Orthodox Jew, typical Baal Bas, what's the difference? The siddur is the same, the davening's the same, and you're telling me they don't have mechitza? Well, the most Orthodox shows out west, or many of them didn't have mechitzas either. So really, what's the difference between a rabbi from the seminary and a rabbi from yeshiva college, REITs? And many synagogues, they would bring in both. They bring in a rabbi who came from REITs, and they bring in a rabbi from the seminary, and they'd have a prabba, and then they decide which one they want. And something's unimaginable today, obviously. That's what they would do. And right at the time that the Orthodox are trying to create a division to show that we are not like them, there is a difference. That place has a man named Mordechai Kaplan. Any place that allows Mordechai Kaplan to teach, that clearly is no good. By Lieberman, the Eloi from Jerusalem coming in there, which was a coup for the conservative movement, it puts the Orthodox in a difficult situation. And that's where we're going to pick up. Maybe next class we'll get into the role of Mordechai Kaplan. Mordechai Kaplan, he was destined to create all sorts of troubles, and the role of the Orthodox. What does it mean to be an Orthodox Jew in the 1940s when you can have a shul without a mechitza, and you can even have a rabbi from the seminary and all these things? Lots of good things we'll get into. It's already 9:32. Let me take the questions. Thank you all for joining us tonight. Someone privately sends me that Rabbi Rekefet mentioned my book on the Sri H, that he was talking about it. So I encourage anyone who's interested in one of the great Gedolei Yisrael. When we do have to go back to the Sri H. That was when
Can I mention something?
Yes.
The last, I don't remember, maybe 2 weeks ago in your class that I listened, you was talking about the Chazon Ish, and you mentioned just the name of Rabbi Tzvi Yehuda.
Yes.
And I was wondering if you know that Rabbi Dr. Tzvi Yehuda was 15 years old when he met the Chazon Ish, and the Chazon Ish told him, don't go to a yeshiva, study by me. And he studied with him 6 years.
Yes. Now, not only do I know about it, just Google my name and Tzvi Yehuda. I wrote about it, and we're having in October, let's see, it'll be on YouTube. I don't have the date here.
Yeah, I
giving
have everything that you wrote.
Yeah, I'm giving a talk on Tzvi Yehuda and the Chazon Ish. Why am I giving a talk? Because the family donated the letters that the Chazon Ish.
I know. I am a very good friend of Chasya.
Okay. So thank you. So well, you'll please be with us when we do that talk. Those letters of Chazon Ish Tzvi Yehuda are the most important letters the Chazon Ish ever wrote, and
yes.
I will explain.
And I was a very good friend. I'm speaking with his wife Chasya almost every day, okay. And yes, and actually he and Chasya were the shatronim for me and my husband.
Mazel tov, that's good. So we'll get back to him later. When I mentioned the Sri H is because now I do the classes much more detailed. We'll have to come back to them. I could do 10, 15 classes on the Sri H, but until then, if anyone's interested, you can read the book. I can tell you that I'm not, after Lieberman, we're not doing the Sri H. I'm going to go to Zalman Ber Bamberger. I want to do classes on him. And then a figure that many people haven't heard of, but I love him. His name was Rav Yosef Zachariah Stern. Anyone who remembers Yalag, Kotzel Shel Yud, the evil rabbi, that's Rav Yosef Zachariah Stern, Vafsi Kuzari. So we'll get back to that. I say evil in quotes because Yosef, it's really Yalag who's the evil one. But Ellen asked, Stuart Eisenstadt related to reconstruction of graves. That is interesting, Ellen. I could be. Maybe he's descended from him. Eisenstadt. Yeah, maybe. Also, people,
He says he is, so let's trust
Yes,
Hagar.
okay, that could be the answer of it. Also, people with the name Ash, Aleph Shin, are descended from our Eisenstadt as well. I told the story, the great story that every time I've been there like 7 times, Central Europe, we go there, we go to the grave. I talk about Rameir of Eisenstadt, Meir Ash. No one's ever there, even though it was redone. 2 times ago, I go, and lo and behold, you have these 2 Hasidim there. First time I've ever seen this. I go up to them, and typical Kiryas Yoel types that they hardly speak English. They speak English with a terrible accent, and even though they're born in America. And I ask them, what are they doing here? And lo and behold, they say, we're here because one of them, it's his grandfather, great-great-grandfather. He's a descendant of the Maramash. It took me about 30 seconds to realize that they didn't understand. There's 2 Maramashes. There's another Meir Ash. He was the rabbi of Ungvar, Uzhhorod, now it's in the Ukraine, in Hungary. And then he's in the 19th century, and this is from the 17th century. They came all the way to Europe. They went to the wrong grave. You'd think that your forefather, you know the difference between the 2 Maramashes. But someone, Talmud Chacham tells me that Reuven Margolios makes the reference from Nehemiah to Shmuel standing for Vidoy. I did not get it from Reuven Margolios. I found it in I don't even know what it was, one of these old Hebrew newspapers years ago. I have to track it down. That's where I got it. But Reuven Margolios, he's one of these people who knows everything. Susanna Levin says, penance sounds Catholic. Yeah, so, but what else? Do we have a better term for it? If you go to the rabbi and you ask the rabbi to give you a tshuva so that you can achieve repentance, what is there another English word to use for it? Yes, I agree. It sounds Catholic, but Mike says the story they say is Rabbi Saul to refuse to give haskama to the Chavis Chaim Sefer over this disagreement. That is, do you have to tell someone that you offended them or spoke lashon hara about them when they don't know about it? When asked about the fact that the Chavis Chaim was quoting Rabbeinu Yonah, he said that we are allowed to disagree with Rishonim and Musar issues. Well, thank you, Mike. I knew that they say that Rabbi Saul opposed this. I didn't know about haskama, that's the story. I don't know if it's a true story, but because if you look at the haskamas of the Chavetz Chaim, it's unusual haskamas. It's not the people, some of them you wouldn't expect them to give, and others you'd expect different rabbis. One of them is the Aderes. They say that Rav Kook actually wrote that haskama, but David Eisen says, Stuart Eisenstadt is indeed the center of Meir Eisenstadt, so perhaps this is a connection. I'd love to know the answer. If anyone listening, I guess I could email Rabbi Bill it also, but I'd love to know. Ellen says 2 heads, perhaps super conjoined twins. I don't know. Mike says, is Dr. Mirsky related to Yitzhak Mirsky, Hegunei Halacha? I don't know. It's a good question. Yitzhak Mirsky was a Rebbe of mine when I was in BMT in 1985. And he wrote a very good sefer, number of volumes on Halacha, the Parsha. Oh, Hedda says that the debate was at McGill University and you were present as a student. It's such a loss that Yaakov Herzog, he to die so young, and he suffered at the end, and he had so much to offer. He was an example of someone of Torah Derech Eretz in the highest sense. That is an outstanding Talmud Chacham. You have to see in one of the early Hapardeses, Rav Moshe Feinstein writes an article, Rav Herzog, the chief rabbi, has an article about Sanhedrin. Rav Moshe Feinstein writes an article of critique of Rav Moshe, and Yaakov Herzog in Hapardes writes a defense of his father against Rav Moshe. He's in his 20s here. He was an Eloi, and he didn't remain in the Torah world that is Torah study. He always obviously was a frum Jew, but then he moved on into other areas as well. So it was a big loss. Thomas says, why can't you buy the Mishnah edition? Well, it's out of print. You can't find it. They don't have it. You can see it. Fortunately, Otzar HaChachma put it on. So if you want to see it, we have translations of the Mishnah. What do we have? We have Art Scroll. I guess Art Scroll today would be a better translation of the Mishnah if you're looking in terms of Rishonim, although Art Scroll wouldn't have some of the things that would have. But you have the Blackman edition. This is definitely better than the Blackman edition, the other editions. It's just a very, very nice edition. And if you read the Fishel autobiography, he mentions that they wanted to put the English translation in the back. And Fishel insisted that no, you need to put it together on the same page as the Hebrew, because the typical American balabas, we want him to look at the Hebrew also. And but no one knows about that. Rabbi Shapiro says JTS was not conservative. It was supported by a conservative movement, but was totally independent. Yeah, but it becomes, there's no question that today it's conservative. In those years, it was independent. You are correct. On the other hand, it supplied all the rabbis. I shouldn't say all of them. Many conservative rabbis came from Orthodox yeshivas as well. But it's not like today where conservative synagogues have to go to the seminary. That's like the rule, I'm told. But you're right. It was Finkelstein. They were independent, and the Rabbinical Assembly, they did their own thing. They had their own rules. Correct. Now, davening was Orthodox, but not Orthodox today. I'm going to show you the picture. I'll show you the picture in another class, in that men and women separate without machitza, though. So, but that's in those days. You had plenty of Orthodox synagogues that had mixed seating. Yes, and Rav Soloveitchik. Yes, I showed the thing about Rav Soloveitchik. We spoke about that last class. Yes. Well, Hertz graduated from seminary. Definitely, he was the first graduate of the seminary, but that's before Schechter comes. Once Schechter comes, you can't make the case that the seminary is Orthodox ideologically in the way that why yeshiva colleges and REITs is. I mean, you can never have an Orthodox institution with someone like Mordechai Kaplan. On the other hand, you had much of the seminary that was identical to what you would have at a place like REITs. But you had more at the seminary because you had things that you never would have at REITs. That's the difference. We're going to get into more detail about this next class. Justin says Rabbi Drachman. Rabbi Drachman, by the way, he goes to Germany and he gets smicha from Breslau, which is they call it the conservative, the historical school, Frankel's place. But then you had many graduates of there, just like you had many graduates of the seminary in America who become, complete Orthodox rabbis. Drachman not just becomes an Orthodox rabbi, he translates from German, the first translation of Hirsch's 19 letters, which for decades was the only translation and a very important work. He publishes an edition of Rezerachia, the Baal HaMaor, one of his commentaries, and he is one of the most important rabbis, Orthodox rabbis in America. He was a spokesman to non-Jews advocating a 5-day work week, so there could be Shabbos observance, yes. Baruch says that Solomon Schachter JTS was of Chabad roots, of course. His Hebrew name was Shneir Zalman, definitely. Rabbi Kenneth Green says Hertz was among the earliest graduates. Not among them. He was the first musmach of the seminary, was Hertz. Yes, the Rogachover was Chabad. He was a Hasidic Rov, the Rov for Hasidim in Dvinsk. I'm not sure why you mentioned that, Baruch, but it is true. There were two rabbis in Dvinsk. One was Rameir Simcha. I can tell you that in all the hagiographies, it describes how Rameir Simcha and the Rogachover had wonderful relationship, but I have evidence that it's not true, that there was tension between them. But to Rogachover's credit, after Rameir Simcha dies, they open a yeshiva called Or Sameach in Dvinsk. That's the first yeshiva Or Sameach. I've said before, I don't know why they call the Or Sameach in Muncie Or Sameach, or now also in Israel. The Rogachover went and gave shiurim there, like once a week or so, to the students there. But yes, the Rogachover was Chabad, but not Lubavitch. He was the Babroisk branch that we spoke about. He wasn't Lubavitch. William Gewirtz says Chaim Regensburg was HTC and a major posek. He issued a Harat Shah permitting tripartite seating and microphones. In retrospect, his bet paid off. Most of those traditional shuls eventually turned Orthodox. We spoke about Regensburg last semester. I don't know what you mean by tripartite seating, because Rabbi Regensburg also permitted, unless you're saying that he insisted that all the shuls also have a section just with separate seating, but I'm not aware of that. Rabbi Regensburg permitted traditional synagogues that he permitted mixed seating. Clarify, are you saying, Bill, that Rabbi Regensburg also said that they had to provide a place where those who want to sit separate, that's tripartite, have men, women, and in the middle you have joint seating? I can tell you that that's not the way that the traditional shuls operated. They operated simply, most of them, just mixed seating. And if you didn't want to sit near women, so you found a place where there weren't any women. I agree with you that his bet paid off, because those traditional shuls, because the rabbis who were Orthodox rabbis encouraged the parents to send the kids to day schools, and the kids became Orthodox. And those shuls, almost all of them, ended up joining Orthodoxy. We'll get back to that next class. They developed Machitza Minyanim, etc. Yeah. Wolfgang Gewert says the Rav claimed that he can learn during Avelos like an Itztanus can shower during Shiva. The Rav said he's an Itztanus with regard to learning. That's actually was said with regard to Shiva. There's a Yerushalmi that says it. It's not about Tisha or Tisha B'Av. I get confused. It's one of the I know about Tisha B'Av. I think that's about Tisha B'Av. There's Yerushalmi that says if you're an Istanus, you can learn, or maybe I have it backwards. But about the other one, Shiva, or the reverse, I forget. I think it's Shiva. There is no such heter, and but the Rugged Shavar didn't say that. Rabbi Hartman says, when I was rabbi in New Bedford, Massachusetts, people told me they drove to Shul on Shabbos because the JTS rabbis were observant Jews, and that psak was acceptable. But Rabbi Hartman, do we really believe them? They were driving to Shul anyway. They were driving to Shul before the rabbis were there. Are there really that many people who decided to drive to Shul because they issued it, or were there conservative rabbis?
I can tell you.
Or were the conservative rabbis? Maybe they're saying it because they want to justify themselves.
I think the way after that was the way Muslim justification. I don't disagree with you with that. I don't fit you, Mark. I just don't know. This I heard this myself from many people.
I maybe, but I might. They issued this ruling because everyone was driving to Shul. So the attitude was, well, everyone's doing it, so let's see if we can find a justification for it.
I did have one man, a lawyer, all his life. He drove to Shul, went home. He did not listen to the radio. He did not go shopping. He went only to Shul, came home, and back from Minchah Maariv.
So there would be an example of the.
Oh, the only lawyer.
There would be an example of the negative impact of that ruling because Chabad. I have a Chabad shul near me. They drive to Shul on Shabbos, but Chabad never says it's permissible. So Robert Gordis, at the end of his life, it might have been his last article, he said that we failed in conservative Judaism because we never made demands. We thought that we'd get people and we'd keep them by constantly lowering standards. And that's not true. You see with Chabad, you can keep the standards. The conservative movement could have kept the standards. You can't drive to Shul. And the people would have come. So you try to work on them to, even though they're driving now, to stop driving. But you don't need the conservative movement continuously. When the people started doing something, you knew that it was just 10 years before the conservative movement would find a way to justify it. And Rabbi Robert Gordis, if you know who Robert Gordis is, he's
he was
in the seminary. He said that we made a big mistake in thinking that this is what we should do. And I'm not saying that he even ever supported this responsive from the 50s, but he said the movement. There you go. I didn't even see that. So Rabbi Shudnow says that driving was a huge mistake. Yeah. Now, a few more. David says, the question if one pays 5 or 10 salim for conjoined twins, one of the commentaries rules that the father should pour a drop of hot oil on the heads, and if the other head feels the pain as well, then they are deemed to be one person. And this source is used homiletically to assert that when a Jew from one community feels the pain of a Jew from another community, they are deemed to be one. Very interesting. Yes, Bill says that some shuls had separate seating, not all. Yes, 100% there were some shuls. Baruch says, if machitza seating meant men and women in separate sections, but no machitza. No, mixed seating, and this is what Rabbi Soloveitchik is referring to when he speaks about the Christianization of the synagogue. Mixed seating is men and women sitting together, family seating. The family that prays together stays together. Separate seating is, as we know, separate seating. The halacha is you need a machitza, but there were shuls that didn't have a machitza, that just had separate seating. That was how the Reform shuls were in Europe until like the 1920s. So the first mixed seating congregation was Isaac Mayer Weiss in Albany, New York. Until after World War I, even the Reform synagogues in Germany had separate seating, no machitza. So that is not halachically acceptable unless you have a big separation, but it's not the Christianization of the synagogue, and it's obviously of a lower level problem than mixed seating. And look, if you're separate seating with no machitza and you're not at the end and you're in the middle, you have a machitza. You have like the 5 guys on the left of you between you and the women. That's a kosher machitza. It might not be the best thing to go to a shul like that, but that's from a pure halachic standpoint, that would be machitza. The traditional movement permitted mixed seating as a horat shah. Rabbi Regensburg said, if that's what the shul wants, and if we don't send an Orthodox rabbi into it, Then they're going to go for a conservative rabbi. Rabbi Regensburg said it's okay, and he didn't. And you go there and you do what you can do. And he didn't say, for instance, you have to leave after 2 years. But Rabbi Soloveitchik also, and YU also permitted rabbis to take shuls that were mixed seating. We spoke with Rabbi Riskin last semester. They, however, used to put on a time limit, things like that. And Ner Yisrael allowed its rabbis to go to these shuls. This was the only way to reach these places. It was a war. The Lubavitcher Rebbe also agreed that it's in the Mochama. He told Rabbi Riskin that this is acceptable to do. So MNS Frankel says, I think that Rabbi Louis Bernstein, successor to the Sola Pool, no, not Louis Bernstein, it was Louis, his name isn't Bernstein. His name he's an Ashkenazi, I forget his name now, but it's not Bernstein. He was a musmach of JTS. Gerstein, yes. Gerstein is a musmach of JTS, and he's not like Herbert Goldstein. Herbert Goldstein, who's the father-in-law of Rav Shar Yashav Cohen, the son-in-law of Harry Fischel. He's a musmach of the seminary, but then he also gets Orthodox smicha. We have a number of examples of that. No, Gerstein, although he did get an Orthodox smicha as well, he was a member of the Rabbinical Assembly. He got that Orthodox smicha, like a pro forma smicha, simply because of an Orthodox synagogue, but he was a conservative rabbi for all intents and purposes, a member of the Rabbinical Assembly, and he was a rabbi of JTS, of the Spanish and Portuguese. In fact, in Hapardes, when Rabbi Yitzhak Nissim, the chief rabbi, comes to visit America in one of those years, that's the visit. He went to Rav Soloveitchik. Rav Soloveitchik gave him such honor. Rav Soloveitchik said that when I look at Rav Nissim, I think of the Rambam. But he spent Shabbos in Spanish and Portuguese. Of course, that's the most distinguished Sephardic congregation. Well, in Hapardes, they have this open article, open letter to Rabbi Nissim. How can you be at a synagogue where a conservative rabbi is the rabbi of the synagogue? And David Eisen cites this, okay, Shishta Mikabetz, that's the source he's referring to. Ellen says conservative synagogues had mixed seating. The traditional synagogues in Chicago did not, to my knowledge. No, the traditional synagogues absolutely had mixed seating. And also, I should now says in Canada, there were conservative shuls with separate seating. And there were also traditional shuls that had, they called them traditional synagogues, traditional shuls, but they had mixed seating as well in Canada, but they never went egalitarian. They remained, and to this day, they remain traditional. That is mixed seating, but not egalitarian. Okay, we done a lot today. Thank you all. Gemar Chasima Tova. It'll be a while since we see each other again. So hopefully it'll all be good things. The cases will go down, and once again we can start feeling good about the future in Tufshin Pei Beis. So good night, everyone.